There's a moment in every parent's life when they have to make an impossible choice. But what happens when that choice is so radical, so defiant of every social expectation, that society labels you a criminal? What happens when a mother looks at the family court system, looks at her children, and decides that the only way to protect them is to refuse to participate at all, even if it means handcuffs, a cell, and a record that will follow her forever? This is the story of a woman who chose jail over compliance. A woman who became a headline, a cautionary tale, a villain in the eyes of many. But to her children years later, she became something else entirely. She became the only person who truly saw them. And if you've ever felt trapped by a system that claims to protect you while slowly destroying you, this story will shake you. Because sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is say no, even when the consequences are unthinkable. If you're ready to see family court, parental rights, and the meaning of protection through a completely different lens, hit that like button and subscribe. This isn't just another custody battle story. This is about what happens when a mother decides that her conscience matters more than her freedom. Her name was never supposed to matter. In court documents, she was listed as respondent, non-compliant party, obstinate. The judge called her reckless. Her ex-husband's attorney called her unfit. The media called her selfish. But her children, the two people at the center of this entire legal storm, called her mom. And that was the only title she cared about. The custody battle started the way so many do. A marriage that crumbled under the weight of unspoken resentments, incompatible futures, and two people who loved their children but couldn't stand each other. The father wanted primary custody. The mother wanted the same. Both believed they were acting in the best interest of the kids. Both were certain the other was dangerous. And so the case dragged on. Month after month, hearing after hearing, thousands of dollars evaporating into legal fees while two children sat in waiting rooms coloring pictures of houses with two doors. But somewhere in the middle of year 2, something shifted. The mother started to see the pattern. Every time she complied with a court order, the goalposts moved. Every time she attended a parenting class, submitted to a psychological evaluation, agreed to supervise visits, there was another requirement. Another hoop. Another expert hired by the other side to pathologize her tone, her facial expressions, the way she held her children too tightly during drop-offs. She watched as the system designed to protect her kids became a weapon. And she realized something that would change everything. The process itself was the punishment. The court wasn't interested in the truth. It was interested in compliance. And compliance, she understood, meant participating in a narrative where her children's trauma was treated as evidence of her failure, rather than the result of being torn between two homes, two realities, two versions of love that felt like war. She saw her daughter's grades drop. She saw her son start pulling out his eyelashes at night. She saw them both learn to lie, to say what each parent wanted to hear, to perform okayness to survive. And so she made a choice that most people would call insane. She stopped showing up. She refused to bring the children to court-ordered exchanges. She ignored the phone calls from mediators and the emails from her attorney. She knew exactly what would happen. Contempt of court. Possible criminal charges. The loss of any legal standing. But she also knew that if she continued to participate, she would be sacrificing her children on the altar of a system that cared more about paperwork than people. The first time the police came, she was calm. She explained her reasoning. She said she wasn't kidnapping her children. They were in their own home, safe, attending school. She wasn't hiding. She was just refusing to be complicit in a process that was harming them. The officers looked uncomfortable. They had children too. But the law was the law. She was arrested in front of her kids. They cried. She told them she loved them. She told them she would never stop fighting, even from inside. The jail cell was cold, gray, indifferent. She spent 72 hours there before the hearing. 72 hours of fluorescent lights and metal benches, and the smell of industrial cleaner that couldn't quite mask the despair. But the strangest thing happened during those hours. She felt clarity. She had made a choice that was entirely hers. No lawyer had advised it. No self-help book had recommended it. She had stepped outside the script society writes for mothers, the one that says you sacrifice everything, including your principles, for proximity to your children. And in that cell, she understood that proximity without integrity was just another form of abandonment. At the hearing, the judge was furious. He called her selfish. He said she was manipulating the system. He demanded to know what made her think she was above the law. And she looked at him, this man in a robe who had never met her children, who had spent perhaps 15 total minutes reviewing their case, and she said something that would later be quoted in every article written about her. She said, "I'm not above the law. I'm beneath a system that has failed my children at every turn. And I will not be the one to deliver them to more harm just because a piece of paper tells me to." She was sentenced to 6 months. Contempt of court. Willful violation of custody orders. Her ex-husband was granted sole custody. The children were told their mother had chosen jail over them. That narrative spread. Friends believed it. Extended family believed it. Even some of her own supporters wondered if she'd gone too far. Because our culture tells us that mothers who don't comply must be crazy, must be bitter, must be using their children as pawns. We can't fathom that sometimes the system designed to protect children is the very thing destroying them. But here's what happened during those 6 months. The children lived with their father. And without the constant court battles, without the endless evaluations and the fight for their loyalty, something unexpected occurred. The truth became visible. Her daughter, who had been labeled as having anxiety caused by her mother's enmeshment, started having panic attacks at her father's house. Her son, who had been described as thriving in his father's care, began telling his school counselor about things that made the counselor call Child Protective Services. The very outcomes the court had tried to prevent by removing the mother's influence were happening in her absence. Because the problem was never her. The problem was a system that had believed the more polished parent, the one with the better attorney, the one who performed stability rather than living it. When she was released, her children were older. Her daughter was 12. Her son was 10. They had been through hell. They had lived with their father. They had been to therapists who asked leading questions. They had been told over and over that their mother had abandoned them. And yet, the first thing her daughter said when they were finally allowed contact wasn't anger. It was, "You were right." Because children know. They know when adults are performing. They know when the system is protecting appearances rather than protecting them. They know the difference between a parent who fights dirty and a parent who refuses to fight at all because the fight itself has become the danger. Her children had spent 6 months learning what she already knew. That compliance with a broken system doesn't keep you safe. Just makes you complicit. The years that followed were not easy. There were more hearings. More evaluations. The custody arrangement shifted again. Her ex-husband's mask slipped in ways that could no longer be ignored. Her daughter, now 16, testified in court about things she had been too scared to say before. Her son, now 14, wrote a letter to the judge explaining that his mother's refusal to participate hadn't been abandonment. It had been the only honest thing any adult had done during the entire ordeal. And slowly, painfully, the narrative changed. She never got those 6 months back. She never erased the record. She never stopped being the woman who chose jail over a custody battle. But her children understand now. They understand that she wasn't choosing jail over them. She was choosing integrity over a system that wanted her to betray them slowly, legally, with the court's blessing. She was choosing to say, "I will not be the instrument of my children's suffering, even if refusing makes me the villain." Today, her daughter is in college studying social work. She wants to reform the family court system. She speaks openly about what it's like to be a child caught between 2 parents and a machine that pretends to care but mostly just grinds everyone down to compliance or contempt. Her son is in high school. He writes poetry about the day his mother was arrested. About how he didn't understand then but understands now. About how the bravest thing she ever did was stop pretending the system was working. And their mother, she lives quietly now. She doesn't give interviews. She doesn't write op-eds. She doesn't need vindication from strangers. Because her children know the truth. And in the end, that was always the only truth that mattered. She didn't choose jail over them. She chose them over everything else, including her own freedom, her reputation, her future. She chose to be the kind of parent who would rather be punished by the state than be the state's enforcer. And that, as her children now understand, is a kind of love that most people never have to prove. There are thousands of parents right now sitting in family court waiting rooms. They are complying. They are documenting. They are performing stability for evaluators and jumping through hoops and pretending that the process is working. And maybe for some of them it is. Maybe some cases are resolved justly. Maybe some children are protected by judges who actually see them. But for the ones caught in the machinery, for the kids who are being slowly ground down by a system that treats them as evidence rather than human beings, sometimes the most protective thing a parent can do is refuse. Not because refusal is easy, not because it's safe, but because compliance with harm is still harm. This mother's story isn't a prescription. It's not advice. It's not a call for every parent to defy court orders. But it is a reminder that systems are made of people, and people make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes compound into something so toxic that the only moral choice is to step outside. To say, I will not participate in this, even if it costs me everything. Her children understand now. They understand that the world called her selfish, but she was the only adult who loved them enough to risk everything. They understand that the system called her non-compliant, but compliance would have meant delivering them to harm with clean hands and a clear record. They understand that she chose jail, yes, but what she really chose was them. Always them. Even when choosing them meant losing everything else. And maybe that's the definition of protection we should have been using all along. Not the parent who looks best on paper. Not the one who can afford the better lawyer. But the one who would rather burn their own life down than let their children be consumed by a process that never cared about them in the first place. The one who understands that sometimes love looks like refusal, like defiance, like a mother in handcuffs telling her children, I will never stop fighting, even from inside. Because that's the thing about impossible choices. They reveal who we really are. And this mother's choice revealed something the court never acknowledged. That she loved her children more than she loved her freedom. More than she loved her reputation. More than she loved the illusion of control. She loved them enough to be misunderstood by everyone except the two people who mattered most. Her kids understand now. And maybe one day the rest of us will too.